Thank you, Mo, and good morning to all our friends and neighbors and members that are online. Welcome for the virtual part of our service, and welcome to everyone who is in the pews. It's so nice to see them filling up. For those of you who don't know, I am Reverend Dr. Elaine Beth Paris-Lua, and I am your interim minister, and it is always my honor to welcome you into First Parish, where our mission is to nurture the spirit, grow in community, and help heal the world. And I forgot I can take this off because I'm more than 20 feet. I always like to extend a warm welcome to anyone who is here for the first time or who is checking us out as a community of faith, whether it's online or in person. Whoever you are, wherever you're from, whatever your story, your faith tradition, whoever you love, or however you identify, you are welcome here amongst us, and we have made a place for you to share with us in this hour. Here, each week, virtually and in person, we always remember that where our building resides, where we work, where we play, where we worship, is sacred ground. For thousands of years, there were people that lived here and nurtured and stewarded this land long before Europeans arrived. So, each Sunday, we take a moment to pause and remember the Wabanaki Confederacy, whose lives and land were taken from them through genocide strategies and colonialism, and what we're going to be talking about today, empire, that whole structure that gave some people the idea that they could take things from other people. The Penobscot, Passamaquoddy, Maliseet, and Mi'kmaq people stewarded this land for generations. And we recognize that the violations of their sovereignty that were perpetrated by the founders of this church and other people in what is now called the state of Maine is something that we want to reconcile, tell the truth about, and support their regaining their sovereignty. So, with very deep respect for the traditional values of that Wabanaki Confederacy, we affirm their sovereignty. We support their efforts for land and water protection and for cultural healing. And the pledge of our congregation is a commitment to that ongoing work of decolonization, educating ourselves about Maine and beyond. So join me just in a moment of silence to let that truth settle into your bones. I can see that now that we're in person, people are remembering that you can light candles of joy, remembrance, celebration. So please light your candles. And if you ever would like me to include it in the prayer, you can give me a little piece of paper and I will say something out loud when we do our time of meditation. I also want to recognize that we have some families returning, and our wee ones will be marching through. Remember, we're going to make the arch when Ray comes up after she tells the story. So please, we recognize you with our smiles and our acknowledgments and our appreciation of all the little wiggles and nudgles and sounds that you will be making. We hope your church chirps inspire our worship. One announcement only this morning, and that is that we've decided to invite your contributions for flowers for Easter. What I've done in other congregations is invite people to make a contribution of any kind, of any amount, and tell us the name of the person you would like to remember with an Easter lily or a hyacinth or tulips. And next week, starting next week, we'll be handing out envelopes that have, say in the front, Easter flower memorials. And then on that, you will write the name of the person that you're remembering and your own name so that we can print. What we'll do is have in the Easter order of service a list of the families that have given in remembrance of someone, or remember, you can give it for an anniversary or a birthday, someone you're celebrating, a new job, whatever you want to commemorate those flowers. And what we want to do is fill the meeting house with beautiful flowers for Easter Sunday. So watch for those envelopes next week. I'm sure you also remember that since February 20th, we have been focusing on our stewardship campaign. inspiring your contributions and financial commitments to help keep this congregation be vital and relevant in the Portland area. And today I would like to welcome and invite Trish and Dan to come forward and give their testimony about their First Parish moments.
I told Dan he had to help me if my mask got caught in my earrings.
I did.
Oh, it's so good to be here. This is our first time back physically in church. It's so good to see. Hi, Dad. So good to see you all. So some of you know us, but some of you don't. So let me tell you a little bit about us. We moved to Maine in 1985, right after we got married. We met at Mass General Hospital in Boston, and we got married in Massachusetts and moved here. And like many of you, we love our adopted state. Dan is a physician and an educator. I have a company here in Maine and also in Dublin, Ireland. We do psychological assessments. Sounds kind of weird, but it's actually kind of cool. We have two amazing daughters. Kelsey is 31. She is a social worker here in Maine. She works with adults and children who have been through trauma. She and her husband, new husband Ethan, got married after a postponement this summer. Actually, that was the last time you and I shared a microphone.
Exactly.
We were dressed a little fancier. And she's pregnant with our first grandchild. Recommendations of names for grandmother would be welcome and received, so please. It's a grandson, so that's exciting. And they just bought a house in Portland, so they'll be staying close, which is lovely. We got dedicated here in 1994, I think, and she is a therapist, a dance movement therapist at a long-term care hospital in Massachusetts. And she just got engaged to a lovely young man, Joel, whose parents are from Uganda. And so as we plan a wedding, we are learning a lot about Ugandan history and Ugandan tradition. So our family is in a lovely space. We're really, really grateful. And so when Reverend Elaine reached out to us a few weeks ago to talk to us about our pledge and whether we could increase our pledge and make a 2-year commitment, it was a really good time for us to sort of pause and think about our relationship with First Parish. We first came here on a journey. I mean, many of you maybe found First Parish, we were church shopping. The churches that we grew up with weren't the right churches for our new family. And we landed here in 1992. Those of you who were there may remember Fred Lipp as the minister at the time. And we found a spiritual home for ourselves and our family. And as we have grown, the church has grown. Like many long-term relationships, we took a hiatus out for a little bit and came back knowing once again this was our spiritual home. So we have a 220-year-old house. Yes, exactly. It's the only thing you can do. You're either crying or you're laughing. And we invest a lot in that to keep it our domestic sanctuary. And we thought, well, this is our spiritual home. This is our spiritual sanctuary. We need to put a little bit more into it. I brought up this because I think about our covenant a lot, and I've been thinking a lot about the words, right? Love, peace, harmony, grow together, to be in service. And I don't know about you, but these last 2 years, there's certainly been wonderful things and moments of grace, but it's not been an easy 2 years in a lot of ways as well. And for many of us, maybe for most of us, we were probably already a little bit vulnerable about the prior 4 years, not to be mentioned in too much detail, but rough, right? So this place for us reminded us about goodness, filled us up. I love the Zen saying, you can't serve from an empty vessel. showed up 5,000 years before, put your face mask on yourself before you put it on somebody else. And this place fills our vessel so that we feel love, so we feel lifted, so we feel reminded about our responsibility to go out and be light and be care and be service. So when we looked at our budget, in between two weddings, a baby on the way, Dan making some shifts in his work, we sat down and really, though, thought carefully about what we had to offer to the community at large and how we could funnel more of that here for us, for our beautiful building, for our amazing community. Because when I think about when we are all lifted, what we offer to the broader community and to the world seemed like a really good investment. Like maybe even a better investment if we had put money into Apple in the 80s. It's worth it, feels worth it. So now to you, my darling.
So I want to just briefly mention another important motivation for us for the pledge and the support that has to do with staff. So First Parish, as you all know, offers great programs, internal programs like the wonderful music and education programs for us to explore issues together, and share our lives together. External programs that we reach out to the community with advocacy or to sustain members of the community in times of need. Now, none of these programs would thrive or will thrive without the support of our wonderful staff. Hannah and Lori, Tobin, our new interim music director, John, and of course, Mo. Okay. A great motivation for us is to be able to contribute to supporting this staff as they work really hard and creatively to support us. So that's just one more thing that I'd like to acknowledge.
So we really want to encourage you. You know, everybody's financial situation is different, but encourage you to maybe explore what we did, is sort of look at what you have and maybe, if you can, consider putting a little bit more in this beautiful basket. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Trish Nadoff and Dan Spratt. And Susan Cook.
Well, thank you, Trish and Dan, for your inspiration today. And to all of those of you who have made a pledge already to the Stewardship Drive. If you have not made a pledge yet, there are 3 easy ways to make your pledge. I have pledge cards here this morning, and you can leave it in the basket or in the offering plate or pass it along to a member of the stewardship team. Tom Rogers is here, and I believe Debbie Schultz is as well, so we're happy to accept those. For those participating in today's service from home, or if you'd prefer to visit with some people today and make your pledge when you get home this afternoon, you can go to the pledge form button at the top of the First Parish website, firstparishportland.org. You also can mail in your pledge card to the church. This is our call to action, because the future is us. We are UUs, and the time is now. Thank you.
Please enjoy the prelude as we begin our worship. pause, just for a moment. That is what worship is a pause. A pause with intention. You get on the computer or you arrive here in the meeting house to worship. Even though, as you use, we have a little bit of resistance to that word because we don't want to invoke some omnipotent being, and we have all those theological things that we are a little resistant to. But when we pause, it is important that this is an ancient religion. It is rooted in the very tradition of Judaism and Christianity, and it's been passed down through the centuries, through the cultures of our ancestors and our neighbors. So when we gather on Sunday morning and pause to worship, we call forth those ancestors, that tradition, and we acknowledge that we're taking an opportunity this week, this day, to sit somewhere on the forming edge of our lives, in the life of the world around us. We're affirming the beauty of nature, of all the universe, the possibilities that exist in each human life from beginning to end. And we remember those ancient roots, but also that our religion is a modern world religion, that we do not shy away from uncomfortable truths or science, that we are honoring truth and the human quest for justice and compassion. So we do not disregard discoveries and all the possibilities of progress, but we carry those forward with the strength of our roots. Here, this morning, we join generations of people who have occupied this historic meeting house to liberate hope, to express love, to reclaim our faith for this time. We gather to worship. Please enjoy. It is a gift to be simple.
We
Chalices and cups are a very ancient religious symbol, and they can be found throughout the world on manuscripts and on altars. They are symbols of sharing, partnership, generosity, openness. The fire that sits inside of our chalice is also a symbol of sacrificial flames that have been the central part of the world's religion and the oldest scriptures. Both the chalice and the flame can symbolize witness, sacrifice, testing, courage, illumination. And today I want us to remember the origins of our chalice, the origins that came out of World War II, when our Unitarian Universalist Service Committee was formed, and they needed a symbol to recognize their clandestine efforts to get orphans, persecuted parents, out of harm's way. I want to light our chalice as we witness the same sort of courage and commitment today in Europe as the world rallies behind Ukraine. So as we say the words to our chalice lighting, we remember the ancient in our covenant. We remember the ancient roots of chalices and flames, and the courage and the sacrifice that they resemble. So, love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is a second, and service is our prayer. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, to help one another, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Tobin is in Brunswick, so we have Ray Jett with us today to share in a story for all ages. Ray?
Hello. Good morning, children. So Tobin's not here today, so it's going to be Sam and I reading a story for all ages. And for this week, it will be The Circles All Around Us. Okay. We begin by drawing a circle on the ground along each shoe. A safe little place just for one person. Nobody in the circle but you. You could keep that circle closed to everyone but yourself. But that would be like a library with just one book on the shelf. So let's draw a bigger circle for you and your family to share. Now you see what all can happen in a circle full of care. You include Granny Dot and Papa Bit, Barkley and Uncle Hank, Great Granny and her cats, and your new cousins. It becomes a happier circle as more loved ones come to stay. And wouldn't it be even better if all your friends could come and play? So you stretch and draw your circle, even bigger than it's been, and let a few more people know they're welcome to come in. In the circle all around us, everywhere that we all go, there's a difference we can make and a love we can all show. Yet, there are still so many outside of the circle who are different in all they do. Though it feels slightly uncomfortable, we draw a bigger circle for them too. It doesn't mean the circle is easy. It can get harder the more we share. But wonderful things can happen when love is known and felt everywhere. As time passes, our eyes open. We see others we really care for. And that's when we ask ourselves, well, what's this circle really for? So let us create bigger circles all around us for the rest of our days. Let our caring ripple out in a million little ways. In the circles all around us, everywhere that we all go, there's a difference we can make and a love that we can all show. As our circles grow and grow, and we watch them with wonder eyes, remember, the first circle started with just the love that you hold inside. And so that is our story for today. And we welcome now for Matthew to play us out. And
Edges of the pews.
and if people on the ends would like to stand and make the archway for the children to walk down through, okay.
We hold a place for you. I was watching you all and thinking when we're doing the bridging ceremony, you're going to have to like hold your hands really high because they're going to be tall enough to touch the top of your fingers. Now we pause for another moment. Each week we pause for a time of self-reflection, a little bit of silence, to consider the candles, the stories they represent, the loss or the joy. And we acknowledge in this moment that there are many people around the world and in our own community who are on the edge of harm's way. So join me as we take into our hearts and our minds the suffering around the world, the illnesses in body or in spirit or in mind. Concerns you may have brought with you this morning are lightened by the presence of your neighbors and friends. We pause for healing, recovery, remembrance. It is in silence that we draw that circle wide. To take in so much more than what is familiar and known. To stretch the capacity of our compassion, generosity, and understanding. Always we pause to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder. The greatest good for all can be discovered, named, claimed, and served. May it be so. Amen. And blessed be. I invite you to hum along to the Spirit of Life. The reading is an excerpt from an article written by Carolyn Miss. You have good reason to fear the state of the world, and you're not alone. This is a time of chaotic change for every single person on this planet. This is the greatest turning point in the history of civilization. Every part of you should be on the alert, and you shouldn't turn off that alert button. The wise and holy thing to do right now is to learn as much as possible about what's going on and how to become a powerful agent of change. If you are going to participate, participate with great wisdom. Follow what your body is doing, because therein lies the path to wisdom. In order for your body to heal, you have to cooperate with the whole thing, right? Well, it's the same with our earth and the community of human beings that has gotten us into this mess. We are moving towards collective community. We're on the verge of entering a galactic era, a new era, where we're no longer going to live with this tiny idea that we're alone in the universe. Everything is breaking down so we can build it up anew. We're all going to have times of great fear. It's probably time to get a prayer group, to meet with people as a community, not just a therapy group, but a what did you learn and what are you going to do group. What ideas have you had? Share them. Be part of the founding mothers and fathers of the new era. Gather so you can discover your strength. Do not be a passive agent If something is bothering you, remember, you can call your legislators. That's how not to sit and be afraid. It has been almost 20 years, I think, since I read David Corton's Corporations Rule the World. How many remember that? I think it was 1995, 94, around there, where he exposed the relationship of global corporations and all the structures that were causing rising poverty, unemployment, inequality. Violent crime was breaking out. Families were falling apart. The environment was deteriorating. And in his next book, The Great Turning, he said, and those were the good days. Those were the good old days. So in The Great Turning, he refined some of those concepts that he exposed in his first book. And he says this about empire and earth community, which have always stuck with me. I think it was 2006, 7 that he wrote this. Empire organizes by domination at all levels, from relationships among nations to relationships among families. For 5,000 years, probably more, empire has brought fortune to the few, condemned the majority of humanity to misery and servitude, suppressed the creative potential of our species, and appropriated much of the productive surplus of human societies just to maintain those institutions of domination. Earth community, by contrast, features organizations by partnerships, unleashes the human potential for creative cooperation, and gives priorities to allocating the productive surplus of society into growing generative potential for the whole of creation. Those words are interesting to read as we pass unbelievable and unimaginable milestones in this year and last. We reached 7.8 billion people that we need to feed, clothe, and shelter. The World Inequality reports that COVID has exacerbated all of the inequalities between the very wealthy and the rest of the population. The richest 10% on the globe today take up more than 52% of the world's income, whereas the poorest half of the world lives with 8%. On average, an individual from that top 10% earns about $123,000, and an individual at the bottom, $3,920. That's a year. And when it comes to valuable assets like land and homes and other material goods, the gap gets even wider. The poorest half of the global population owns less than 2% of the global of wealth, while the richest 10% own 78% of the world's wealth. How does that happen? I think I'm trying to say, if there was a time, I think it was it's a sailing term, like not on my watch. So, and it was also a nursing thing, not on my shift. So these things happen, but nobody wants to claim, not on my shift, not on my watch. And it feels like, in light of these statistics that I share, that there actually don't seem to be words enough to adequately express the kind of economic and social consciousness that we face. In the introduction to The Great Turning, and that was a while ago, Joanna Macy wrote this, and I think this sums it up pretty close. By what name will our children and our children's children call our time? Will they speak in angry frustration of the time of the great unraveling? when when consumption led to an accelerating wave of collapsing environmental systems, violent competitions for what remained of the resources, the dramatic dieback of the human population due to pandemics, fragmentations, and the warring fiefdoms ruled by ruthless local lords? Or will they look back in joyful celebration on the noble times of the Great Turning, when their forebears, their ancestors, their parents turned crisis into opportunity, embraced a higher order potential of their human nature, learned to live in creative partnerships with one another and a living earth, bringing forth a new era of possibility. He's written a new book called Change the Future, Change the Story. That's Corton's newest book. And in it he tells us we humans live by stories. And the stories that now govern our societies set us on a path to certain self-destruction. He calls the current story sacred money and markets. Money, he tells us, is the measure of all our worth and the fundamental source of happiness. That's our current story. And would anybody disagree with that? No. What is everybody striving for? And Earth is simply the source, the infinite resource for creating all that wealth and spreading around all that money. Inequality, environmental destruction, oh, those are just unfortunate consequences, unpreventable and unavoidable in our pursuit of money. And this will remain our guiding story unless, with intention and attention, we decide to change it. Everyone knows that that story promotes bad ethics, bad science, bad outcomes. Can't we keep the story going? How is that? When we're supposed to be intelligent, creative Homo sapiens, we're the ones who beat out all those other sapiens. How could we do this perpetually? Our well-being, the Earth's well-being, our children's well-being, everything depends on us changing that narrative. Change the story, change the future. We need a story that talks about partnership and human beings as vital parts of a living Earth that's part of a living universe, and that we partner with that Earth and that universe. I think we forget that we are the architects of our fate, that we are the ones who shape the story, and thereby our future. We seem to have this passive, and I don't know, maybe it's part of our amphibian, that reptilian part of our brain, that we just march along doing the same thing and thinking we have no control and no ability to change the story. So, I wonder, are we going to continue affirming the sacredness of money? I wonder. After Corton wrote this book, Malcolm Gladwell wrote The Tipping Point. And that, it's fascinating, because in that book, long before he could imagine a global pandemic, he used the analogy of epidemics to talk about how human beings move to a tipping point in creating a new story. What motivates them? And if you remember in it, he tells the story of the hush puppy people, the hush puppy factories, that the hush puppies back in the mid-90s they used to be everybody's favorite shoes, you know, those little suede things, and they went out of favor and started declining, and they'd gone down to, I think the factories were making about 30,000 of them a year, and that was not sustainable, and so the company that made them was actually thinking about stopping production of Hush Puppies. Until in the East Village of Manhattan, these quirky teenagers, they probably had odd hair and weird piercings, decided they loved Hush Puppies. Probably started with a half a dozen of them. And then it spread through the village, and then everyone noticed that the cool kids in school were wearing these suede shoes. And then the parents noticed the kids were wearing the suede shoes. And then people were looking in all the secondhand stores and trying to find these suede shoes. And then a designer noticed these kids were wearing these suede shoes. Well, within a year, production went up to 430,000 Hush Puppies. Within 4 years, it more than quadrupled that production. And I don't know if Hush Puppies are still around now, but they became like the hottest fashion thing ever. And it was all about the same principles that have us in a global pandemic. So he outlined the things that were necessary for social change as equivalent to an epidemic. So he said that the most important thing is that you have to have a few early adopters. You have to have those first few teens that are going to notice the shoes. A first few people that are going to notice that the story that we're in is not sustainable. And then the second thing is epidemics or social change requires stickiness. Now with the Hush Puppies, the stickiness was everyone noticing the weird kids' shoes and wanting them. The idea stuck for a small group and then expanded. And in the fashion design place, or whether it's with a virus, that stickiness, and COVID certainly has proved it, that there's a mutation that happens in this spread. And then when the human body can no longer change fast enough to adapt to the new mutation, it starts invading, spreading, and you have global contagion. The disease has stuck. So if the message was about social change, it would mean that it would have to become so loud that the call for social change, starting with a few, would grow and grow and grow so that human beings could no longer ignore it. It sticks. And that seems to be what's missing right now, whether it's about inequality or environmental destruction. The idea, we can't seem to make it stick. The third element in an epidemic and also in social change is a context, and I think this might be what's relevant for us in trying to think why these things are not sticking. There is, the theory is that when people are in a group, the power for decision making or the motivation for change decreases. It's diffused amongst the group because we're actually programmed that if we think someone else will do it, we won't. So one person alone actually takes and is able to create more motivation and more response than a group, because you're not looking around saying someone else will do it. So how does that influence us? If we look around and we think someone else is going to do it, we won't. So maybe it takes our intention to say, nobody else is doing this. I have to. I'm looking at you, Brenda, because I'm thinking about Facebook. You were the one who pushed us, and we're actually doing something about that. And I see that idea of, where was I recently, where a lot of people were saying, it was on a post on the UU Ministers website, or Facebook, not Facebook, but website thing, where somebody was promoting something and said she was going to do it on Facebook, and everybody responded, I'm intentionally not using Facebook. And there was a majority of responses, so now they're looking for a different platform, a different way to share. So it's an idea, one of those small ideas that's beginning to stick. And you were the first one here to call our attention to it. So thank you for being an early adopter. Change the story, change the future. Our human stories, for better or worse, have always included religion, which is why I made this the topic of a sermon, because ours is a religion, right? Ancient and contemporary both. And we have always been, forever, those early adopters. We were the heretics. We were the ones who said, hate drew a circle to keep us out, but love and I had the wit to win. We drew the circle that kept them in. So we have always been those people that have been leading on the edge of social change, whether it was in Transylvania being the first Unitarian country, or the first country to adopt Unitarianism, to pilgrims coming here, to abolitionists, to women's movement, to the first people to ordain women, to the forefront of LGBTQ rights and same-sex marriage. We have been at the forefront, and sometimes we forget that. So the great turning has begun. And those of us who experience the call are going to look and say, nobody else is doing this. So I'm to move us towards that tipping point. On the wall in my bedroom, I have this framed print of Brian Andrews' Story People. Do you remember? They're the oddly shaped little beings, and he always has a great quote. So there's this little whimsical, angelic figure leaning over these words. In my dream, the angel shrugged and said, if we fail this time, it will be a failure of imagination. And she leaned over and placed the world gently in my hands. The world is in our hands. And we can't depend on anyone else to take care of it. Individuals are stepping up across the globe in small and huge ways to support Ukraine. Black Lives Matter, William Barber, small initiatives, small groups of people who are saying no one else is going to do this. Environmental activists. It's time to join them. It's time to put our collective effort into the great turning. It's our time, and it's our issue. Break the silence, break the isolation, change the context, change the story, and we will change the future. Robert Fulghum wrote this in, I think it was on fire when I lay down on it. One of my favorite of his books. For imagination is stronger than knowledge, and myth is more important than history. Dreams are more powerful than facts, and hope always triumphs over experience, because love has always been stronger than death. I hope you will join together, recognize the power of a community and one individual to change the world. It's what we have right now, and it's all that we need. I invite the choir up to sing a beautiful song, We Would Be One, and listen to the words. So now we're going to receive the offering. How do we think of our offering in terms of sharing the change of that story? I don't think that that idea, so the story that Corton talks about in terms of sacred money, so how would we differentiate between the generosity of giving to institutions that promote change as opposed to corporations and profits? So think about that as you generously support this institution and the change that it could bring about in the world by being a force for social change, a force for healing lives, a source for changing the story. All your gifts are holy. All your gifts are appreciated. Thank you. For the earth, for the preciousness of all the people, plants, nations, villages, animals that she sustains, choose fearlessness over fear. Don't look to someone else to change the story. We change the story. Our chalice is burning bright, reminding us each week we hold the whole world in our hands. Please join me in the benediction. We extinguish the flame, the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Please enjoy the postlude.